and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has wrapped up a high-profile visit to Poland, having met with Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski and President Karol Nawrocki. The talks came against the backdrop of Russian drone provocations, strained ties with Minsk and growing pressure on Beijing to influence Moscow. At the same time, Poland's closure of its Belarus border has disrupted key Chinese trade routes into Europe. What does this mean for Polish diplomacy, China's role, and Europe's security? Joining us now is Małgorzata Bonikowska, President, Centre for International Relations. Welcome, TP World. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us, Małgorzata.
Thanks.
So let's start with the reason for Wang Yi's visit to Poland. What do you think was on the agenda?
Number one, the border control and the closing of the trade route to China through Belarus and Poland. That's something which is very worrying for China because it stops its export to Europe. Number two, obviously, General talks about economic situation. China wants to continue trade with Europe. China watches the relations between the US and its partners, also in Europe. And Poland and other countries of the region look at the US trade policy, which is quite difficult, tough to us. So this pushes us a little bit more to be closer or more open to discuss with the Chinese partners more intense economic cooperation.
Okay, can I pause you there, please, if I may? I'd like to put up, I believe we have a picture of a map which shows the so-called Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. Covers pretty much the whole globe, including bits of Africa. Lots of Asia, the Middle East, and all the way through Europe. It's somewhat concerning, isn't it?
Well, that's the Chinese way of having influence or expanding as well. China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001 and in 2 decades became really a superpower. China now, after 20 years of doing business, producing and becoming a factory of the world, is the main trade partner. I stress, main, number one trade partner for most of the countries of the world, including Europe, including the US. So it is replacing the US in its role of being dominating partner in trade. Obviously, this brings a big question mark concerning what it means for these countries who do so much of trade with China. For example, Poland buys 13 times more from China than we sell to China. So this is a very important trade imbalance. And there are many other countries in this situation. Our position is very difficult. There are some other countries who have less deficit, but the deficit, it's pretty much a standard in the trade relations with China. So the world is not very happy right now about this situation. It used to be a different perception of China. China was seen as a cheap labor force place, as a poor country with no danger to anyone. Now everybody is feeling dependent on delivery from China of different sorts of products.
Right.
So that's exactly what we want also to discuss with the Chinese partners.
Okay, well, you mentioned Poland imports 13 times more from China than the other way around. A little bit risky, isn't it? Especially when you consider, for example, what happened to the supply chains during COVID, and the rest of the world, suffered badly because they couldn't get hold of anything. You'd have thought economies would have learned their lesson after that, but it seems that they haven't.
Absolutely right. And this is one of the reasons Europe, once we discovered these effects of so long supply chains, and we also discovered that in many products or the components of such products, we are totally dependent on China. For example, in pharmaceuticals, some of the components for our drugs are just produced in China, so we cannot really produce in Europe without these components. So Europe just decided to go for more strategic autonomy, understood as being self-sustainable. By the way, China is pretty much doing the same. China's position, China's policy towards the foreign actors is, first of all, to get rid of massive Western products in China and Western services. That's why Chinese consumers have WeChat instead of WhatsApp or Facebook. So wherever they were able to, they replaced American or European services or products with the Chinese ones, just to be not dependent on the foreign powers. That was a step number one. And step number two is that China wants to sell as much goods, but also services to the other countries to make us being dependent, not themselves to be dependent on us. So this is a constant competition, and Europe is very much aware of that. But despite of that, we cannot deny that Chinese products are now very good, quality excellent, and now still cheaper. So, for example, we have a competition, tough competition in the car industry. Vehicles, cars from China are beating the European producers because they are as good as the European cars and they are much cheaper. That's why the European Union decided to implement 30% of the custom duty on the Chinese
yes,
cars.
but the Chinese are exporting more than just cars, aren't they? They're exporting ways of life
Absolutely.
and politics and all sorts of things. Tell me, what is it that Poland can do to reduce its dependency on China?
These are the talks we were trying to have. We want to convince the Chinese partners to open up more their market to the products and services from Poland, to just make this trade imbalance more balanced. That's very much obvious, which is not an easy thing to get because Chinese market is really, the policy is very much to protect their own production, their own brands, not so willing to open up to the European producers. But in the same time, we have we are realizing that China buys from Russia. So this is an extra line of negotiations with the Chinese partners. What it means, in the same time, they want to have good relations with Europe, with Poland. They want to have trade routes through Belarus to Poland and further to the Western Europe. But in the same time, they don't help us really to solve the problem with Russia and Russian war in Ukraine. So we are counting very much, we are hoping that China can use its leverage, which they very much have over Russia, to help us to find a right way to finish off this war.
Can Poland use the leverage of the fact that the border with Belarus is closed, thereby disrupting trade routes from China? Poland has some leverage as well at the moment. Can that be used to, for the rebalancing of trade, but also to put pressure on China to stop supporting Russia as it does?
Yes, it can. I think it's very obvious to China that Poland had to protect its borders against the drones. Drones were obviously not done by chance. It was a test done by Russia and Belarus to see what would be the reaction in Poland and of other allies in NATO. So in such circumstances, and having also Zapad exercises, military exercises, pretty dangerous to the NATO members, especially to the eastern flank countries. Poland obviously decided to close down the border with Belarus. So that is for China a problem, because China to expand, China to grow, they need a trade. So they are very much for calming down the situation, for controlling these conflicts. But in the same time, China buys from Russia. So it helps Russia to survive despite the Western sanction. So our line of negotiations is just to show the Chinese partners, just look. I mean, we don't have any other solution. We have to control our borders. We have to protect our citizens. So help us to resolve this problem. So it's not only a discussion of trade. China came with trade list of arguments. We negotiate with the Chinese partners, not only about trade, it's very much a combination of security issues as well.
Right, okay. Now, in the last couple of minutes that we have left, Donald Trump has called for European countries to actually impose tariffs on China. How do you think Poland and other European countries will respond to that call?
Well, Donald Trump is a very interesting politician. From one side, he implements custom, tariffs, barriers on his allies, including Poland, including the EU, including countries who can be a counterbalance to China, such as India, 50% of tariffs more. And on the other side, he expects us to be a loyal group of allies and help America to solve a problem with China. It is not really coherent. It's contradiction. So we believe that if America wants something from Europe first, it has to, and Donald Trump especially has to listen to what Europe wants from America.
Right. Małgorzata Bonikowska, thank you very much for sharing your analysis. Unfortunately, we have to end it there, but have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. That's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, though. As always, lots more coming up. Goodbye.